including their own Rumble, psfrumble.com. And by the way, for the MTP that's, throwing a fit, doing jumping jacks in their diapers, because psfrumble.com is quote unquote an unprotected site or whatever. It's a GoDaddy URL. The website patriotstreetfighter.com is obviously secure, as is Rumble. So MTPs, beware, just so you know that. psfrumble.com is Rumble channel, Brighteon BitChute. And we have a heck of a guest in here today, one of everybody's favorites, because he has amazing information all the time. Today is the day with GeneDecode. Gene, how are you, buddy? Liking those blue eyes and that expression on your face today, different than the last time.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you. Just smiling. You got to smile.
You gotta smile every day. Every day above ground is a great day, especially if you're a Chilean coal miner. So, hey, let's jump right into it. I know your time is somewhat limited. We're going to make sure we get you off on your next endeavor. Look, people are always wanting to know what's going on, what's really going on behind the scenes. We've known you to give us information on the tunnels over the course of a couple of years, the DUMS, the exfiltration of anybody who could be saved. Got a lot of good information from Megan Rose in the last couple of months. Galactic Federation apparently has, with combined forces, Navy, special ops guys they're working with have cleaned out the Draco influence, pretty much brought that empire, at least here, down. But from what I understand now, all their cabal minions, the Klaus Schwabs of the world and other people have to be dealt with, because that cabal still exists, and we, the people, we're the ones that have to do the job. It's like in the past, before, people say, why don't these highly benevolent, very intelligent species, who do have an interest in our own spiritual ascension, humanities, because it's tied directly to theirs, why don't they come in and why don't they save us from the shit show? And the answer always is because, first of all, it interferes with free will. Number two, it breaks the laws of the universe. And number three is that every time any higher realm of entity, spiritual, physical, or otherwise, intervenes in the past, what has happened is we, humanity, would turn it into a religion or a cult every time, because we have been genetically manipulated and altered to a degree where we have this desire to need to worship something or something other than ourselves, which means instead of looking inward, where God is, as we are a part of that single photon of light or whatever, everybody wants to look outward. They want to look at a pastor, priest. They want to look at the Pope. We know what a shit show that's become on a planet, the satanic realm, really. And we just fail to realize and understand or be educated on how truly special we are as a species, a human race. That's why this is such a, sort of a pass by roadway for, galactic races, because they want to get close to this particular solar system because of us, because we are considered genetic royalty of these advanced species. And it enamors them on how we are and what we are. And also the reality of this massive undiscovered power that we have as a being, more so than they possibly could imagine having themselves. Of course, the other side wants us to not know that. They've done a remarkable job. They've kept their boot heel in the back of humanity's necks for thousands of years. And this is the end of the road for them, because we are going to bring it all down now that we've eliminated their controllers and these malevolent, species that have been basically given them orders and made them their minions. The overlords are dealt with. Now we need the human Earth-based cabal people in boxes in the ground, and then we get our planet back. So relative to your mindset, Gene, on how you see this, and then let's jump into what you know in the latest intel.
Yeah, so it's getting interesting as they go down. They're not used to being counterpunchers at all. They're always been in absolute control of everything. They manipulate, as Kennedy said, they infiltrate, and divide and conquer. And they're used to doing that. That's their nature, is to divide and conquer. And now that they're in a counterpunch, they're kind of dividing and conquering each other. There was a recent meeting they had of the Bilderberger group. They didn't say it was a Bilderberger meeting. It was a Holocaust convention meeting that they took over. And in that, the big players, Schwab and all of the Mr. Q-Tip, I call him Schwab, Mr. Schwab. Gotta have some fun. All those other guys actually got literally in a fist fight over what they're going to do next. Like, what are they going to do in Ukraine? Wow. What about the Russians? What about this? It was hilarious to me because it's like a bunch of kids in high school or junior high that, you know, bullies that got together and they wind up having a fist fight with the bullies. I'm like, it's crazy what's going on, you know, to watch it come down and to watch all of this. It's kind of mind boggling to me. I never thought I'd see this happen. And then, of course, I'm really, really busy with the website, and I can show a little.
Lost your volume there momentarily. Hopefully we get you back because I know you're having internet attack issues. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but looks like you're still here. We just don't hear you. Talk to me, Goose. Are you there?
Trailer we have for that. We're looking at launching.
Hey, Gene, I'll interrupt you to back up about 1 full minute because you blanked out on volume. We missed everything you just said. We can't. Okay, we had another blink. Gene is muted. I'm going to ask to unmute. So, okay. All right, let's begin that answer again. What's going on in the Intel world of, yeah, we know, heard everything about, you're right. They've, you know, counterpunched. They've never had to do that. Now they're eating their own or getting in fist fights because they're all, you know, now in trouble and they're running out of answers. So we'll take it from there. That's when you blanked out.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, it's just interesting to watch them in the panic mode. Then of course I'm also really busy. I've got a website I'm getting ready to launch. We were going to launch it on the 7th, but we wanted to have some material there, and I've been too busy going through decodes, writing up a whole, along with the Blessed for Service team, we're putting together some amazing decodes, expanding Hollow Earth that I promised a long time ago. That's just about done. I'll have that on there. Then also we'll have a full decode on the Ukraine, its history and where it is now and all of that. That's quite phenomenal, along with all of the non-terrestrial items that are there that are pretty huge in the Ukraine. You know, it's pretty much like a giant underground web of tunnels and domes and just, it's stunning how much is there and how much is interconnected. Working also on another update, US and world level dumb stuff. I've discovered through all this stuff with the Ukraine that the interconnection and of course the gold that was in the Vatican that stretched in another tunnel where the Vatican dumb went into Albania and then it goes down to Jerusalem, of course, that actually went all the way to the pyramid, to under the Giza Plateau, and then to the Hall of Records between the Sphinx's paws underneath the Sphinx. And then there was gold that went from that tunnel in Albania all the way up into the Swiss Alps and the German Alps, and the Alps in general, let's put it that way, are mostly hollowed out and full of gold and all kinds of, you know, ancient artifacts and stuff. They're working on that too.
Let me ask you about the tunnel. Like, you know, we know that the tunnel, again, some of the people in the world now are just, you know, hearing this reality that there is a tunnel system worldwide underneath the US, high-speed levitation trains, you know, California to New York in 20 minutes, all these things that the elites have built with technology that exists that could change humanity, kept for themselves while they continue to force us to struggle. But the first one, and you're one of the primary people on the planet that has actually brought a lot of information to the world on these DUMBs, deep underground military bases, what Area 51 is all about, the ones that have been taken out by the Alliance over the last couple of years, play by play, you laid that out. We learned about the tunnel from the Vatican to Jerusalem also, if I remember right. There's a stretch of it 150 miles long, 60 meters wide and 40 meters high stack of gold bullion. Is that a reality? Have you heard that as well?
That was true.
Mm-hmm.
They removed gold.
Who has?
It's removed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took 35 huge cargo ships, the C5 Galaxies, to remove. I got the numbers right. To remove the material, the gold.
Right.
Then additionally, and the reason they did that is to make sure there's no side tunnels, and there is. When they got to Albania, there's a tunnel that took off going towards the Alps to Geneva, and that connects to the Geneva complex, which has underneath Lake Geneva, that connects to CERN. And they took CERN, and the Alliance is now controlling CERN. That's pretty huge, which they're doing there. I'll go into that as well. But that tunnel system, like you said, connects all over the world. That revealed to me what turns out to be another 36,000 miles of tunnels and maglevs and all of that stuff that I had not been aware of, that I'm in the process of researching and mapping that out. When I first discovered the maglevs, and people, when I first started talking about the dumps, first they sent a clamper guy who, first it was a guy that just says that's ridiculous, there's no dumps. Well, people know there are some. They knew Cheyenne Mountain and Iron Mountain and a few others, Raven Rock, that stuff. If you do your research, those are kind of obvious. But then next, they sent a clamper who said, there are dumps, but there's not like thousands of them all over the world and tens of thousands of miles of tunnels and maglevs going Mach speeds. And no, actually there are. And even the one in Dulce actually has portal technology, the one that they still have that. Dulce is mostly into the Alliance now. They get on a shuttle, like a little, thing you do at a park, a theme park, and they go through a system, and they're looking at holograms that when they look out the window, they don't know they're not on Earth, but they're not on Earth. They're in a dome on Mars or on the moon. And so they were working on Mars and moon. The same thing when the people work in CERN. They can go to work, take the train to DC and take another special train that goes, they don't know where, and they wind up in CERN. Or they do know where they wind up in CERN. I mean, it's insane what they had going on under this planet, that our lives would have been massively different with the technology that the Germans had starting in the 1890s, with Zeppelins that had anti-gravity without, hydrogen or, making it lighter than aircraft. It was actually lighter than anything. It was non-gravitational. And so they had that technology for a very, very long time. Imagine where the human race, and they were talking about in popular mechanics back in the 50s, getting anti-gravity cars and all of that. And now that's actually in development. Even more exciting to me is, in the hollow expanding Earth, and doing that and understanding why and how that works and why the Earth is actually expanding. That theory was originally discarded because of what's the driving force to make the Earth expand. They went into continental drift because they couldn't see what a driving force would be. The postulates by Carey at the time was that the gravitational constant is decreasing in pulses. That's ridiculous, and we can prove that hasn't been happening. So that theory was discarded for the continental drift theory, which is just as ludicrous, that there are subduction zones for all of the massive oceanic ridges where the Earth's oceans have been expanding for only about 200 million years. If you look at the core samples from the bottom of the ocean, there's nothing on the bottom of the ocean anywhere that's over 200 million years old, which means 200 million years ago, there wasn't any oceans. Well, what's the expanding force? And that gets into low energy nuclear reaction, like Mike Adams was talking about, cold fusion. And plants actually do that. That's what they do to increase their mass. They uptake minerals from the soil and then replicate it. So if you look at a redwood tree, a sequoia, that was all made from elements of rain, sun, and soil, there would be a crater around that tree. That's hundreds of tons of wood. And it turns out they actually do the same thing, that there's now companies that found a lattice system using metals like palladium and other rare earth metals and things to do cold fusion, as they call it. It's actually a low energy nuclear reaction in which you are actually creating fusion by reducing what's known as the Coulomb barrier, which is the explosive force inside the atom that is held in by what they call the strong nuclear force, which is actually gravity returning into the singularity at the center of the atom. It's not actually a new force, it's just gravity going the other way. It's pushing against the Coulomb force. If you reduce the Coulomb force, they call it reducing the Coulomb fence or lowering the fence. There's many terms for it. In that case, the atom will start can readily take on new protons and neutrons and literally change into a new element. You can take hydrogen and you can change it into helium or any other element if you continue with the process. And that's what cold fusion actually is. And then you generate a kick of electrons out along with energy. You get a massive upswing in energy. It's extremely efficient and extremely clean. Unlike high energy nuclear reactions that produce a lot of radioactivity, like in a nuclear submarine, all you're doing is using that high energy fusion, fission, whatever you're using, to create heat. And the heat creates steam, and that powers the engines. And then that's condensed in the powering the engines, runs back, and it's a closed loop. Well, you could replace those nuclear power rods with cold energy rods, or what they call hydrogen tubes. And so they are actually in the process, just finished the process of a meeting July 25th through the 28th. ICCF 24, I believe, is the company that had a meeting in which they showed and demonstrated this. And I agree with Mike Adams that they need to have, I hope they have, and I pray that they have massive security, because we know that every time a company goes out and gets that kind of technology going, they disappear. Their employees disappear, their equipment's their offices and their warehouses are raided, because they've not wanted us to have this technology since long time. If with human race had had this technology in the 30s, we would have been spread out across the galaxy. Just even the Milky Way, human race would have been spread out so thin you'd have to have an internet to find somebody to get together to get married and have kids, because you'd have planets with 3 people on it, So, and there wouldn't have been population, there wouldn't have been the pollution. It would have been Tesla's technology, where we'd have free energy and all of this other stuff that they squelched. Go ahead.
The whole world, Gene, would look so amazingly different. I tell people all the time, the Garden of Eden is on standby waiting for us to rebuild it. And I explain to people, look, God didn't create a planet of scarcity. It's absurd. Like, we acquiesce to the idea of capitalism being the most efficient model of sociopolitics, but then we got fascism, Nazism, communism, etc. All of these political constructs created by the overlords of the planet and pitted against each other, right? And so we fight. Capitalism is the person that's the most efficient, then can get the most whatever reward or desired, whatever. Well, that's still kind of like saying, like, it's the first time I've ever admitted I'm a socialist. All right. I am a quantum realm socialist, God's realm, where there's nothing but abundance, and like the universe and the planet the soul itself continues to expand. So these guys have grabbed up all the wealth on the planet in whatever material form, gold, palladium, silver, platinum, whatever, and they hide it. They hide it all. And for people to not get this, that the Garden of Eden is right in front of us. You really think God would treat you like, I got 3 kids. I'm going to throw 3 of them into a playpen, going to put in 1 toy and let them duke it out. Like, come on, no parent would do that to their kids. Our source is not going to do that to us either. It's all abundance. Because they've shut all this down on us so they could control us, use us like rats on a wheel to spin their machine, to print money, keep us busy and exhausted. Because of this, we are now 300 years behind in our own spiritual ascension. So it's not just the material things. It's not just having access to massive wealth that exists on the planet right now. They haven't even recovered it all, but even just what they recovered, there's enough wealth there for every human, to the last man, woman, and child, to live like a millionaire on this planet and not want for anything, which means what? When you don't want for anything, you're looking for other ways. If you're not a reptilian or a Gates or whatever, and you want to be a philanthropist, you truly want to do things to help people unleash their own potential, make them happy, watch them blossom. And that's basically serving others versus serving self. So we have so much of this weight on us. The people that aren't awake, they can't possibly fight their way out of it. I mean, you talk about, hollow earth. Most people today still wouldn't believe you, or would be just like, that's hard to believe that there are benevolent, highly advanced, humanoid races, non-terrestrial, or maybe they're terrestrial. Maybe they were here, they were on Terra, from the beginning, but they're living inside the planet. Like there's massive honeycombs, caverns the size of the state of Texas, with their own ecosystems, their own light systems. And it's not a sun, but it's some type of ecosystem that can create light and whatever. People have a hard time getting their head around that kind of stuff. It's real. And I understand that. I've intrinsically known there's been more than what they've been telling us. Since as a kid, I've felt that. Now that we know, we're trying to share this with other people. People have been on Mars for generations from the planet. Here, Americans, never been on Earth, living on Mars, right? It's really tough for people to get their head around. That's why I say Elon Musk is a cabal puppet or player, because he's been talking about going to Mars for years now. It's like, we know that guy's full of shit, because if I know that we're on Mars and we have been for generations, so does he. So it's like a diversion. I'm going to work on getting us to Mars. So my point for all this is this. This planet should look like Avatar, like James Cameron's Avatar, where we've blossomed into these beautiful beings that integrate. We don't need these concrete jungles and the imprint of roads and all these things that just harm the planet, wipe out species. We can live integrated together, right, in this harmonious environment. And that's what I think the world looks like. You're going to see the deconstruction of all these steel, concrete jungles. People like Jefferson warned us about, piled on top of each other in the cities of cesspools of Europe. That's what Jefferson warned us against. Anyways, that's just to say that I like your messages, because they're always provocative to help people understand, no, this is real. These things that you're hearing, this isn't just made up stuff. If you put the puzzle pieces together, you can understand it better. You can see it. We are moving toward this ultimate takedown, and we are going to unleash the wealth of this planet and redesign it to however our vision, serves us or takes us. You agree?
Yes, and we see the world waking up, from the enslavement of the Gateses, and I'll be redundant, the reptilians. The truth is coming out, and then, for example, the hollow earth, if you just study the physics, I have a video that'll be part of the little production I do on the front part of GeneDecode that'll show a ball of water spinning with air in it that has some vitamin pills mushed up and tea leaves in another case, and they're spinning it, and it starts to get like a donut. Literally, it gets hollow in the middle. If you think of a ball of rock and other materials, of all the 92 elements that we see on Earth, maybe more, they've hid that from us too. As I've recently become aware, element 135 may actually be on Earth in ores that they've hid from us as well. But as you spin that, the water gets hollow. Well, if you do that with a ball of 92 elements, the heavy stuff will centrifuge to the center. Well, in the case of the 92 elements, those things are reactive. Those heavy metals like uranium, plutonium, thorium, if you get enough of that, and that's what's the difference between a planetoid? They downgraded Pluto to a planetoid. Why? Because it's not hollow. That's why, because it doesn't have at the center a small fissioning mass. You get enough, you create a fissioning mass. You create a supercritical mass, and then it goes nuclear, and you have then the atom being broken apart, releasing the binding force, or the gravity wave that's going back now inverts and goes and pushes the material around it away. And you already have that rotating at the center. Additionally, now you have an engine. You have a highly functioning, you got a ball of very conductive materials in the center around a fissioning source that are rotating. You have a dynamo, which then creates a massive electromagnetic field like we know the Earth has. And that electromagnetism is 10 to the, I think it's 95th power, stronger than gravity. That and which is another decode we'll be doing, is the electromagnetic universe. Is electromagnetism is actually the main force that's causing how everything out in the universe looks and how things function here on Earth as well. And it actually overcomes gravity quite easily. And so that opens up the poles, and you have these huge holes going into an inner sun. So not only do you have a honeycomb, like you were saying, Scott, you also have this opening and an inner Earth with an inner sun. And you then, as it continues to expand outward, it eventually, as water and rain is formed from volcanic reactions, and then that cools the surface inside and out, you have a long S-shaped rivulets of intracrustal seas that are freshwater forming, which erode as the water comes off of the mountains and everything down into the bottom of those seas. And it creates sandstone on the bottom along with the pressure of the water on top. That eventually weakens it to where those long S-shaped rivulet, they're like an S-shape, because if you spin a ball, it'll make the water, by the Coriolis effect, first do an arc in one direction, and then do like we're in the northern hemisphere, which is actually the southern hemisphere. It'll make a left turn, so to speak. As you watch water go down the sink, it goes left counterclockwise. Then it'll do a right turn going down to the Antarctic. And so as that erodes, the bottom, the magma underneath is making that, getting thinner and thinner. The volcanic and the igneous rocks and the metamorphic rock, volcanic and the metamorphic rock that originally formed, which is very strong compared to sandstone, it'll eventually break. And that's your mid-Atlantic, mid-Pacific, and Indian Ocean ridges and all that. It broke. And so then the centrifugal forces of the Earth spinning will cause the continents to move apart. And so the Earth expands outwards, and that inner area gets bigger and the outer area gets bigger. You don't have subduction zones like they're telling you. It's kind of obvious if you're looking that you would have to have as much subduction zones, in other words, trenches and things, as you do ridges in the ocean where new material is being added, and it's nowhere near. Not only that, you can see on your own hand, if you push your fingers along the back of your hand, you create wrinkles. Well, if you and it also goes against the law of density, of pushing a continental mass into that more dense magma. It's not going to go. It's going to buoy up like a cork. You would have to have mountain ranges along all your shorelines and massive piles of material as you scrape off one plate going underneath another. And it would have to be going underneath the other plate all along the entire continental boundaries, because it's being created all along the continental boundaries in the center, and it's moving outward. So if you look at continental core samples, you're in the billions of years. If you're looking at ocean samples, core samples, you're looking in the millions, hundreds of millions at the most. It's obvious to anybody that it's been moving outwards, and that's why they got continental drift. As you look at the fit of North America, South America, and Europe, it's obvious, because the Atlantic Ocean on a globe, you can see that fits. The problem is you look at the Pacific Ocean and you don't see the fit, because the Pacific Ocean is more than half the size of the globe. You can barely see the edge of one continent. You don't see both simultaneously. You see the fit. And then you have two huge pieces that move so far, they're no longer in the Pacific Basin, one being Antarctica, the other being Australia, which used to be up in that part of that fit and actually fit into that. That's why if you look in Antarctica, it used to actually be, Australia used to be actually two countries. And on the western side of Antarctica, of Australia, were cannibals, and the Aboriginal people on the other part wouldn't go over there. And they were Punjabi. They're descended from the Punjabi when Australia was connected to Asia. From India, there was Punjabi that walked across that part of India and wound up in that part of Australia after then it broke off. And so there was actually another country there up until the 1800s. And they redid the maps, and they always hide our history from us. And so it's going to be doing all of these decodes on the GeneDecode. We'll be doing tons of stuff of new information and new stuff to come out and tell people like what's really going on in Ukraine. Ukraine, the cabal took it. It used to be an area called Tataria. On our timeline, it was a small area. On another timeline, they truncated it and ended it because they were getting anti-gravitics and free energy. So they couldn't have that. So they ended that timeline technologically, tucked it in electromagnetic energy systems and all kinds of technology, literally truncated that timeline into this. So you do have parts of that timeline over here, like buildings with 2 floors underground with windows and doors that are now concreted or bricked up. And you have people from there, and you have artifacts from that timeline. And so that area was actually became the Khazarian headquarters of the Khazarian mafia, or the what is I call the Zionist Jews that infiltrated the Jewish people and took them over and took over all of the top, like they do in every system, all of the top hierarchy and power. So they run the system, and they said, oh, you're the chosen, because they're chosen. They feel that we, because they're not, their genetics is quite a bit of it not from here or not human. So they, say, well, we're chosen to rule because you're not us. You're not the privilege of God, their God, which is not the God of all creation. Their God's just a local bully. So you have this local bully trying to run a show here, trying to take over everything, is in league with the intergalactic and inter-universal AI that is that's a death cult. What they're starting to realize is that what they're serving is something that feeds on organic life itself. And when it gets done, they'll be going the same way they wanted us to go, which is dead or completely AI'd, like the Borg, where you see them turning gray. Well, guess what, people? It's called graphene oxide that then does Tesla-phoresis, along with the other nanotech they shoot into you or chemtrail into you, or through Operation Indigo Skyfall, and all this other stuff that then makes you hooked up to the internet. If you don't believe me, get a signal detector for Bluetooth for your app for your phone, and go see by people that have been jabbed multiple times or even singular times, and they have a Bluetooth address. Hello, you can even go to a graveyard, and I showed that, where people in the graveyard are sending signals from 6 feet down still, even though they're not kicking anymore.
People have
they're
a hard
down
time.
there.
People have a hard time believing stuff, Gene, that's even a reality. But here's an interesting concept in terms of AI. You've heard me hammer away on these, podcasters in our community, quote unquote truthers. I hate that term, even influencers. I hate both those terms. It's like a separatist term, but from we the people. But I see them attacking each other, and which is totally stupid. That's like, hey, we're the Marines, you're the Army, we're fighting an enemy. Let me shoot some Marines in the back. It's the most insane bullshit. I can't even. It's hard for me to tolerate it. But listening to with Megan Rose here recently, and of course, having good friends turn on you like out of nowhere and start attacking you online. And I was like, what? How does this happen? And apparently, she said, well, she's been informed by Galactic Federation, because she's an abductee, 5 years old, 9 years old, rescued twice by the Galactic Federation. She's obviously an incarnate here for either to help or for her own spiritual, progress. But and when they brought her back, off planet, when she was in 2019 sometime, and brought her memories back to her and made her aware, well, their communications that they have with her, it's not like putting a chip in your brain. It's like an energy disc, as she described it. It's a disc. I don't know if you can see the energy, a ripple, whatever, but it's a disc. that's put inside, your brain, so you can have that connection, like whether it's telepathic or whatever. But these things fascinate me. We were talking about, why would some of these people just out of nowhere, like it'd be like tomorrow you start to attack me and discredit me, or vice versa. And I said, why? How does that happen? And she said, because there's a very sophisticated, malevolent AI that can basically, the portal that it comes through is a lower frequency, a negative energy bend or whatever. But people who have that of their spirit or being are vulnerable to an AI invasion that basically now is controlling what they're saying. Because it doesn't make any sense when somebody that's at a higher ascended nature, this as well, is that you can get a sense about somebody just by being in their proximity. You don't have to know anything about them, never met them before, their history, whatever, and you just get a sense about them, that they're just, this is a very good energy being, or there's something that just doesn't, something is off about this person, and that's kind of a connection, right? So you say, okay, so how does that happen then? How can you not, like Megan, how can you not pick that up? Like when you're with this person, or you're having a lot of dialogue, phone calls, getting to know them, become very good friends, how can you not just pick that up? Well, it's because it's something that some of these people are vulnerable to, if they're not of a higher energy frequency, serving others versus serving self, whatever it is, whatever vulnerability, it will allow this very sophisticated, malevolent AI to find its way in, and then start taking control of these people and what they say, and then they become basically an enemy of the movement versus an asset.
Yeah, they've been taking control of everything. The assets they've taken over, the amount of gold, it just is the point where I say invest in silver, because when they get a system backed on gold, you could literally have gold coin for every country on earth. There's so much gold. They emptied that huge dump to Jerusalem. Then they found the one from Albania all the way up into the Alps, and that stuff, turns out most of that's filled up too with gold. They hollowed it out and filled it back up with gold. They've been taking gold. I had a student, I knew it was fairly plentiful. I had a student of mine from martial arts that was stationed in Afghanistan, sent me a picture of a valley in Afghanistan that had a 150-mile long gold seam that was about 60 feet high. And he was standing next to a boulder the size of one of the big, huge earth movers that they move, dump trucks they use for massive construction of highways and things up in the mountains and in the Rockies. And this boulder was a gold nugget. And he said the entire valley floor was gold sand and gold dust. I mean, gold is everywhere. I had another student that went to Iraq, and he had what looked like a baseball in his hand. And behind him, I could see baseballs across the desert floor of the sands of the desert floor there in Iraq. And he said, those are actually diamonds. And his friend zeroed in on his hand with the phone, the iPhone, and that was a diamond in his hand. I'm like, so I mean, we're buying this stuff for a fortune, and it's cheaper than glass. It's more expensive to make a nice zircon than it is to make a diamond, other than the effort to cut it nicely and then set it. There's that, but it's so plentiful that it's beyond comprehension. So it turns out gold is extremely plentiful. And then with the printing technology, it's not really, although when gold formulates from the transmutation, like I was saying again, through low energy nuclear reactions, it comes from silicon, from quartz. That's why you see quartz riddled with gold strands in it. It actually, when it's bombarded with energy from our sun that we're looking up at the sky and other cosmic sources, it transmutates. And then also within the earth, it does it as well, because there are particles that pass through the earth. It'll transmutate into gold, and that's been ongoing for billions of years. So the earth is full of silicon. It's the second most abundant element in the earth. First is oxygen, then it's silicon. And that's been transmuting into gold for billions of years. So there's gold all over the place. It's not really, it has a lot of good things you can do with it. It's a really good conductor. If you make it monatomic, it can clean up a planet's atmosphere in hours. So all this garbage, they're chemtrailing us for this and that and this. No, people. Like Mike Adams said, learn biology. What are they, illiterate? They can't read, these elite? I mean, come on. If you're going to believe this, one of my family, just put it the way, it was like saw when I first, my wife and I first bought our home, that we had a quartz countertop. And she's, oh, I'm really glad it's a less carbon footprint. I'm like, what? I didn't say it. I didn't say it because I know where she said her. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. So you believe this carbon footprint garbage? What do plants breathe, people? What are they made out of?
They're made out of. We have to. I'm glad you said this, Gene, because I wasn't even forward enough in my own thinking to say, wait a minute. All this extra CO2 going into the air, number one. Thinking that, look, we learned when we were kids that's the consumption track of CO2 is by plants. They take in CO2 like we take oxygen. And I'm thinking, okay, now there's this massive carbon footprint, or the CO2 levels going out of control, whatever. I'm thinking, doesn't that mean there's going to be much more foliage on the planet because there's much more atmospheric food for them? And if there is, they produce oxygen. So doesn't that mean it's a lot more oxygen for us? Like, how's this a problem? But I wasn't even forward enough to say, what? Like, I was thinking, I'm like, well, maybe there's something that I'm missing, and I just go on my merry way for however long, years or whatever. But I'm glad you said it, because it's like, all right, folks, pull your head out of your backside. Look at your high school science class and everything they taught us 40 years ago when they were still giving us some truth. How could that be a problem? How could it be a problem with CO2 levels going up? The plants are dancing while we're trying to, curb back their atmospheric food supply. You got to stop. Even me stops sometimes to just call bullshit on bullshit. Like, wait a minute, back some idiot up that's talking about that. Like, do you have a brain in your head, or you're just a bullshitter, or you're not thinking for yourself because you're repeating what that guy says, or you're the guy that's making it up to enslave humanity? So it makes you a scumbag. That's why we got to teach people. And I'm trying to do it here. Think. And then when you think and you realize you're being bullshitted, stand your ground. Don't just stand your ground. Call them out. Spotlight them. Show the world who this person is. That's just a total liar trying to, create an adverse effect on humanity.
Exactly, Scott. If you research, what is a plant made out of? Hydrocarbons. What's it do? It takes up soil, replicates it. Now that I've told about that, and I'll do that in Expanding Earth in more detail. And then it takes in carbon dioxide and water, and it makes out oxygen. So let's go back to when the Earth had a lot more heat, but it spreads universally because of the jet stream. So what do you have? Hardly any deserts. You had the world tropical. It wasn't until you got to above 19,000 feet at that time during the dinosaurs that you had snow and ice. The rest of the world was tropical. You didn't have the Sahara Desert. You didn't have the Gobi Desert. You didn't have the deserts in Australia and all over the North American continent. That's the cabal's work. They are actually been messing with us and tying up and messing with the weather longer than most people realize, in other ways than what we know. So why don't you have that? Because you don't have the right circulation. And then you have the gravity of the Earth increasing because its mass is increasing, and that changes the way plants can grow and the height and size that animals and plants can get to. It's just a natural progression. If you had the high amounts of carbon emissions going up, what does it do? It rains down, which is what it's been doing, as acid rain. And that goes into the huge aquifers, and that goes to the continental shelf, and that goes into huge caverns at the edge of the continental shelf and fills that up with water full of hydrocarbons being heavier than water. Once that's still in those huge caverns, which are because of the continental shelf and the bottom of the ocean being much more dense rock, it'll displace in those, make those caverns that, is a lot of other rock that'll be eroded by that acid. And then the sand will go to the bottom. Then on top of that, the hydrocarbons and the water above will pressurize it, and you get what is called gasification, which creates oil, which only takes a decade. If you go to a landfill and they're putting big, huge pipes when they're closing the thing off on the top. Why? Because when they throw dirt on top of it, if they don't have those pipes, the thing will explode eventually. If you're going to put a housing tract on top of that, you don't want the housing tract blowing up. And you can see it within 2 or 3 years at the bottom of that landfill. You've got crude oil seeping out of the ground sometimes. Additionally, within months, you've got those big pipes they put in with a pipe going up in the sky at night. You see blue flames. That's gasification. You're giving off propane, methane. And why aren't they capturing it? We don't have enough fuel. Give me a break. It regenerates itself in a decade. You can't ever use a fossil fuel, but we don't really need to use it with the low energy nuclear reactions and all the other free energy like Tesla had back in the 1890s and early 1900s. But even still, if we were to use it, you can't use it up. What you'll do is create more and more like it was with the dinosaurs. You put up more methane and those gases, then that's brought into the plants as hydrocarbons along with carbon dioxide, which then they give out oxygen. You create big animals, you create more animals, you create more plants, you create, yes, global warming initially. 30 years ago, they were saying we're heading for an ice age on Time magazine. Now they say global warming. Give me a break. Make up your mind. Which is it? It's yeah.
These clowns got together in 1972, the Club of Rome, because they were claiming that the world was going to run out of energy by 1999. And so they're making all of these predictions, and the ice age is coming in the 80s, all that bullshit. And what's interesting is that these are supposed to be the smart people, right? We're gonna run out of fossil fuel energy by 99, and then the world is going to plunge into darkness. Now, look at that time moving forward from 72. Of course, they're supposed to be geniuses, but they didn't factor in the account that we are going to move away from carburetors into fuel injection, which is much more efficient, uses a lot less fuel, number one, or that in terms of recovering oil, that we would be able to drill 2 miles down and then 6 miles sideways to get it into deposits without a footprint in the wrong area. And you can just go on and on. I think it was Paul Zane Pilzer in his book, I think it's called Unlimited Wealth, come out in the 90s. And he was obviously a brilliant economist, Wharton School of Business by the time he was 21, graduate, youngest VP ever at Citibank, a Reagan advisor at the time, really smart guy. And he said, look, the thing of it is technology solves all problems. Anytime there's a problem, give humanity a problem, they'll solve it. Like it's the end of the world. No, it ain't. Well, how do you know? Because everything in our existence is within our grasp to create or mitigate or whatever, anything that comes at us. Like it's that, again, they've stamped out the fire of the source creativity of humanity, or the Christ consciousness creativity. They've done everything to keep us from understanding that that's how massively powerful we humans are in the grand scope of this universe inside of, the multiverse, I guess. But so you got to ask yourself, so all these clowns at the Club of Rome, how were they not then, when it came to 99 and it didn't happen, we had more resources for energy than ever, and we keep expanding that. Why? How come they're not run out? How come they're not, put in front of the public eye? We know why. And with a spotlight, look at this clown. This guy predicted this cataclysmic event. Why would you ever listen to him again? They move on to the next thing, as you know. Like next thing, it's global warming, and the ice age, ice or glaciers are going to melt, and they're going to flood. Basically, Milwaukee, Wisconsin will be underwater in about 10 or 12 years because of the melting of the ice or the glaciers, whatever. It's just nonstop, elementary story bullshit. And it's hard for me to believe that the vast majority of the people don't just see it for what it is and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, they've taught us, or I guess unlearned us, unschooled us on how to actually think and use our own minds. But anyways, that's the most fascinating part, is how adept and astute these clowns are at understanding human psychology and then using it against us.
Yeah, and what amazes me is how short memory most people seem to be. It's like if you had a friend that told you 2 years ago that if you do this, you won't get sick again. And then he gives you another, he says, take this, and then you get sick. And he says, take this, and then that'll definitely stop it. And that makes you sicker yet. I'm flattening the curve.
Yeah.
What curve? You beat a lot curve.
The birth curve, the growth curve, that's the curve they were flattening.
Yeah.
The growth, the human growth curve.
They're flattening. And that's what people got to realize. That's the curve they're flattening. So everything they do will be to flatten that curve. They want to flatten that curve to where it will never rise again. In other words, no more people. How do you get zero carbon emissions from people? No people. You make them AI. So they don't breathe. So that's their end game. That's the AI's end game. It feeds off of organic life itself. If it can integrate it, it can forever feed because it's not connected to the source. So it needs a source. Just like in the Matrix, that is more real than people realize, that you're looking at something that wants to connect. And the same thing it did with CERN, it's trying to bring in help. It created a vortex that brought out a lot of nasty stuff. Now the Alliance has reversed it. They engineered it for several years. They had it shut down, and now they back engineered it and changed it so that now the vacuum cleaner, instead of having the hose on the blow end and blowing out all kinds of dust and nasty stuff from the worst places in the universe, bringing them help, it's sucking it all back in now. They've got it on suck like it should have been in the first place. So all that stuff that they blew out here is being sucked back in. All of the negative groups that came in, some mantids and ants and all kinds of nasty stuff was blown out of their hole. Now it's being sucked back in. So the Alliance is working hard there, and they've gone into that tunnel that goes all the way to Switzerland, they've gone under Lake Geneva, and they've gone into CERN, and they've got all of this stuff. I mean, it's a massive what's going on and amazing. And, every time I think I know something, I go, holy smoke, there's another 10,016, 36,000 miles of tunnels with trains in them. And people are, sending me questions like, have friends arguing, how could there be dumps? How could there be that? How can a train go from 0 to Mach 4? Same way a TR3 does. And they go, well, that base you showed in Arizona is actually a water reservoir. It's shaped like a TR3, but it's, stealth, if you remember from the Philadelphia experiment, some of the men, I met him, that lost his hand because he had his hand, like you often do, you'll rest on a wall and talk to somebody on your hand. His hand, when the ship became energy, and he did, because the wall is steel, which is not organic, and he is organic, their energy filled around them, the energy barrier, there's a barrier around your body so that you can't pass a organic, when you go become energy, through an organic. You can't walk through a tree, for example, unless you literally phase out of this universe into another one and walk past where the tree would be in the other universe. But if you can walk through a steel wall. And so his hand passed through the wall and he lost his hand. How does a TR3 go through that reservoir? Very simply, it's stealth. If it was sitting in a parking lot and stealth, you wouldn't see it. It doesn't have a low radar signature. It has no radar signature. Also, what it's actually doing, what they did with the Underwood when they moved it from Philadelphia Harbor in 1943 to Boston Harbor in 1987 and back, was phase shifting it from T1, we're in 6-dimensional space, as Einstein had said, which 4 physical dimensions, height, width, depth, and 1 that goes inwards. That's to the singularity or God. And then the other 2 are time. T1, they call it T2. T1, what we think of as linear time, is actually a 5 spiral. It's like a slinky, but it goes in different sizes up and down. So you have spirals that are short spirals and you have big spirals, and the slinky can go underneath itself. And that causes deja vu and other effects. And then you have T2, which we think is linear time that we're experiencing. Actually, we're not experiencing that. Well, if you cause electromagnetic energy to swing T1 into T2, then you start going a different direction in time, and you become radar invisible first, then you become totally invisible. And then you actually go outside space-time into, like they said and showed in Star Trek, a warp field, which you can literally get to the point. There was a Star Trek episode, the Pegasus, where they drove it into solid rock. That's what the TR-3s do. They can go through they can go through a mountain. They can, in pure stealth, so can a B-2 bomber. They are actually able to phase completely out. And in that situation, it means that when you go from 0 to Mach anything, there'll be no inertia effects at all. And heat or magma or anything else will be utterly irrelevant because you're not in the same space-time as that stuff anymore. So you're actually going straight through it, accelerating. You could go, like you said, Scott, from DC to LA. It would, believe they got it down to 6 minutes. And you could go from DC to Tokyo in 16. Wow. So the amount of, so people, that was one of the things that clued me off when I first started looking into this and researching it. I go, if this is true, then I'm going to look and watch carefully these elites. When they're doing a lecture at this place in DC, the president's here, then later he's in Japan. Let me compare, because they have the time zones and we don't pay attention. Right. When is he talking in DC and when is he talking in Tokyo? When is he in a meeting with Abe or so-and-so in Tokyo? Way less time than it takes to get on a jet airplane. I don't care how fast the jet's going. You can get on an F-16 or 35 or so. And way less time he is in Japan. I'm like, I know he doesn't have to go through security like we do for hours and pick up his luggage and all that, except for maybe Smokey Joe. I saw him getting in an Uber and no security. I think he's flying in the aluminum can too. Huh? So, I mean, but, for the big guys like Schwab and stuff, when is he here and when is he on another continent? Watch the times that he is being there. Especially back in the old days when they had live TV. You saw Nixon in China, for example, and when was he in DC? The time frames are off. It's too close. There's no way he's getting in those maglevs. The same with you see, many, many other famous people that are zipping over here. We're not comparing it because, we see the time as local time and you're not thinking that's not my time. That's not DC time. He's now in the time in Japan. So now let me compare what time that is based on Greenwich Mean. Take everything back to Greenwich Mean Time. And what is that? And that's another interesting topic that I'll be doing too, is where is actually the international date line and why? It's not where they're telling you. They moved it. It used to pass through a different location. And that's to confuse us as well. And so, but if you look at those time zones, how fast did the guy get from point A to point B? Way faster than you will, even if you're on a Concorde. I mean, you're not going to make it that fast. And you don't have to go through security. You can run onto the plane and run off at the other place and jump into a race car and go to your thing. You're not going to make it, not in that time. It's literally a tenth, usually about a tenth of the time it would take you. I'm like, a tenth of the time, over and over. What are they doing? And then I'm looking and comparing how quick they're from point A to point B, this point A and that point A, B or C or D. And I'm calculating the distance over time. And I'm saying it's a constant speed. Yes, but it's way faster, but it's a Mach speed and it's, Mach 3. And as the distance gets bigger, the Mach can go up. So I'm going, I can do the math and do the physics and do the equations and figure out how, based on the distance, how fast can they go and how, they still have to accelerate up to that speed. It does take, a little bit of time to get up to that speed still. And that's a curve. And I can figure out what that curve is. And so you can see all of this stuff has been going on a very, very, very long time. And, it's fascinating to watch now. Everybody, I can see why they try to clamp this down. They said, when I first did, Gene's out of his mind. No, there aren't. No, there's this. Now everybody on Earth is going, yeah, there's dumbs here and there's tunnels there. It's common knowledge now. Everybody knows, and then the stuff, it'll be the same way, I'm sure, when I do Expanding in Hollow Earth, and people will be rolling their eyes and going, this is absolutely insane. This is impossible. And then a year or 2 or 3 from now, everybody will know. They'll be going, yeah, there's the Garthians are here and they're doing that, and the Patalians are here, and the Asgardians are over there. There's just going to be common knowledge. And, they have the embassy in the Empire State Building. It's going to be common knowledge. Yeah, we always knew that. No, you didn't. You could have, but you didn't. I mean, it's just why the cabal doesn't want this information. The same with the decodes on the Ukraine that one of the Blessed for Service team has done. That's incredible. To go back into the history of the Ukraine and the timeline splits and the merging of Taria and all of the ancient technologies that are now, from Atlantis and Lemuria and these civilizations that the human race had been very advanced. And they took us down, and we're taking it back, and we're not going to take this again. We need to. That's why they didn't interfere. The non-terrestrials that are very kind and giving, because we allowed this to happen. We allowed this to walk in through certain individuals that were greedy or self-centered or whatever, and you want a free ticket. You want a free lunch. And the problem is that every time you want a free lunch and somebody offers you a free lunch, you're going to wind up being lunch. And so that's what we've got to stop forever. And it's now they're coming after the kids. Unfortunately, a lot of people are woken up all over the world. You see the massive, protests all over the world. They're not showing it on mainstream, obviously, but it's everywhere. And only in the US so far, it's about 1.7% of 5 and under have gotten jabbed. So it is changing. People are waking up, but it's a long process of, and as we wake up, we need to not let ourselves fall asleep again. And part of the problem is there's a lot of things that are being kept us asleep. There's actually an energy grid around the Earth that was called the Thosphere, put up by a being called Thoth. Long millions of years ago, that keeps us dumbed down so we can't wake up. But now with the energy called the photon belt, they call it the Masonic ring, it's starting to break down and people are punching holes in it, and all kinds of things are occurring. So now people are waking up. We need to wake up and never fall asleep again, and come together united and realize that we're all one. We're all created by the same God, the only God of all creation, and that everything we do to be selfish and focused on you and yours only, that will affect everything and everyone. You have to turn your thoughts outward. Yes, you need to get the things you and your family need, and then help others. It's not what you need, what you want, what you kind of want, what you might someday want. No, what you need and what others need, and then what some of the things you want to have that would be nice. We need to stand with each other and never allow this greed to get on our hearts again for, material possessions and wealth and all of this stuff. It allowed them to sack us to where the material possessions and wealth we had and what we thought we would gain, and we've lost it all. We've pretty much lost it all. We're on the verge of infinite, permanent, forever slavery. Fortunately, a lot of the Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and, airborne and all of that saw the writing on the wall and said, we've got to make it. And the secret space programs and those, we've got to stand up, or they're not here to take a few cookies out of the jar. They're here to take the jar and all the other jars. And so we've got to never allow this to happen again, and stand together and put up with each other's idiosyncrasies and differences, because we're all unique and created by God, and love each other, and stop this infighting with each other, and stop tearing each other down, and come together. And if you don't agree, or you don't see you don't understand what the other person's doing, first assume they're good, Be careful and watch though, and at the same time, do the right thing all the time. You there, Scott?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I do now.
I got to click in and out here. It seems to be, it seems stable right now. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good, good. I probably missed about the last 15 seconds of what you said. Let's jump into active military operations right now. Right, I've heard that virtually most all the DUMBs have been cleared to the children, with the largest scope of those activities coming out of Australia, the massive amount of what we just say miles of acreage or whatever down there. It's pretty amazing that they've gotten a handle on even Australia at this point. Have you heard this kind of information?
Australia, yeah. By no means all of the children, however, because you got the massive, I don't even know if we could call it a dump. The lower 1/3 of Africa is an underground network of dumps and tunnels, and what's down there, like Nightmare Alley in Dulce and Area 51, that's under Libya pretty much, and a couple African countries are the entire underneath of that. Those countries are like that. So has begun. They have started that, but it's so massive. That's the focus now, why it seems relatively speaking quiet. Now, we're getting our eyes focused on Ukraine, and rightfully so, because that's their headquarters on Earth, on the surface of the Earth, right, of all of the their nasty stuff they do. And, Putin hadn't gone in there, the Russian had not, and the DNR and all of that stuff hadn't activated, we'd have been done, because they were going to launch biological weapons from there all over, and we would have been one more huge world pandemic. This one, like Billy, she said, and her husband said, they'll pay attention on the second one, and so that was their plan. Like I put out another interview where I talked about the SPARS, put out the document by John Hopkins, in which that was their plan, one after another forever. And this one and this one, like they have the Marburg now, and they have the monkeypox. Yeah, it's just side effects to what they've already done, people. That's your body trying to get rid of it. So use the protocols that are out there. They're readily out there. Jim Humble, Andreas Koch, or the stuff being put out that was put out by Zelenko, God rest his beautiful soul, and Dr. Northrup and Judy Mikovits, and all of these people telling you the truth and telling you what you can do about it. Unfortunately, I can't do my years and years of research and my very precise protocols anymore, because they, would put me away. They're not toothless right now, and probably you would never hear of me again. So I got to be careful on that front. But, hopefully in the future where I can again get those out. And I hope, those people that have them will share with friends and family that got from what I had, and back when I could put it out briefly. So it's just, we need, just like I said, you need to get the protocols if you got jabbed. And of course, for me, that means the final protocol in healing is the foot of the cross. So get all the protocols, get yourself healthy, stay healthy, eat right, exercise, drink right, eat right, think right, be right. It's what we say in martial arts, is to walk right, move right, think right, eat right, drink right, be right. In other words, in alignment. And that's, when I teach martial arts, the first massive amounts of lessons are how to move your body, how to stand up straight. Even chiropractors, they say there's a natural bend near the lumbar spine area. No, there's not. That's actually, you tuck your tailbone forward by putting pressure on your tailbone with one fist, the knuckles of your fist, and then push on your right below your belly button, your down chin, and you can actually straighten that out. Most people have a sway back, and it puts pressure on your lower abdominal area. In men, it causes hernias. Women, it causes ovarian cancer, ovarian cysts, and all kinds of cancer problems, both in men and women. Large prostate example. If you straighten that out, you're not putting pressure there for decades, and so you don't have those issues. Learning how to stand up, how to breathe correctly, how to walk correctly, how to eat correctly, how to drink. They've been poisoning everything too. So turn your yard and turn your properties into a food forest. It's not that hard. Kerry Cassidy had a guy on that has his own company that if you want to you don't know how to do it, there's tons of YouTubes out there that can tell you how to do it, but they'll come in and analyze your property and tell you how you can turn your place into food forest, like wicking gardens. I have many of them I've built. It's pretty easy. You can even turn a 2-liter bottle into a small wicking garden and put a pegboard and have a 6-foot food forest on our patio, as we used to say in Hawaii or lanai. You could have a lanai 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, and you'd be having crazy tomatoes and pineapples and all kinds of stuff growing on that thing. You could have tons of food in there if you knew how to grow it. It's not that hard. And it just takes a little bit of research and learning how to do that. So I can go away for 2 weeks. I don't have to worry about it being water because I've created a natural, just like the earth does, an aquifer where there's sand in the lower half or gravel. And then I've got a water barrier around the entire case, or if it's a big pot, I already have that. And then I drill a hole in the side halfway up. And I put a weed barrier and a drain pipe out of there. And when it gets up to that far, the water drains off. So if it's pouring rain, it won't submerge the roots of everything. It leaks out of there. And then you have all your enriched soils and nitrogen fertilizers. Again, study biology, people. Get the cilia and all the various fungus in there to feed the plant's roots. Like the trees are all interconnected across the whole continent with that cilia. It's one large, huge organism, all interconnected, like a human brain, it looks like, literally. And it conducts, just like an avatar, massive amounts of energy and awarenesses of ideas and thoughts. They're communicating all the time. And so get that and build your own wicking gardens and have that little energy forest there. And we'll have that also on deep dives. Persons will be doing presentations on how to do this. I'll be showing wicking gardens and how to, naturally keep your plants from getting fungusy, or how to get your soils enriched, and how to, there's the guy that makes the 5-hour energy shots of how to naturally create nitrogen fertilizers and all of these other things. You don't have to go buy it from Russia. They are easy ways to make it. He taught them this in India and all over the world. He invested a lot of his money. He became a billionaire, and he believes in returning a big portion. So he built a company to research the basic problems. How do you get fertilizer without having to buy it? And how, because they can't down there. A lot of them are too poor. They've made us all too poor to do a lot of the things we need to do. And then how do you get energy? So he, very portable energy systems where you can have light and at night, and you can have the energy you need. So there's all kinds of solutions out there. Highly recommend we'll be doing presentations on that on Deep Dives too, but highly recommend people research that and find out the simple solutions for everything that's out there. There's lots and lots of easy ways to get around the garbage they've done. We've just gotten lazy. And so it's like a friend of mine that I recently saw said, be in the top 2%. We all need to be in the top 2% and stop allowing us to farm our minds and our lives and be debt slaves from cradle, actually from the womb to the grave. And also they've shortened that time frame down too massively to, if you're pushing it a few plus years. We used to live in the thousands. If you go back to the Sumerian king scrolls, you had kings that ruled for 34,000 years. I mean, you look at even Methuselah and Adam and those people, they're living up into the 900,000, Fu Manchu, those people. And there are people that still live that long. There's a gentleman in China, when he turned 150 years old, they gave him a certificate. And every 50 years since then, the Chinese government, whatever it is, government in charge at that time or in power, gave him a 50-year certificate. for the next 50 years. He has 6 50-year certificates. If they gave him the first one at birth, he's 300 years old. So they've robbed us of how to eat right, poisoned our air, poisoned our water, poisoned our food, made everything a weapon against us. Get back to being natural and learn how to do it, and stop eating all the processed garbage or fast food, fast to your mouth, fast to your grave. They're just accelerating the cycle because they only want you when your high productionary rate of between 18 and 50s, then they want you gone. So that's their whole plan, was because if they let you live 900 years and you have a long span of production, you also tend to learn and keep growing in knowledge, and you become aware that you're being played. And if your mind's fully functioning and all of that. Yep. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, not to mention your spiritual life. They from what I understand, that we die at, say, between 70 and 90 years old. We are spiritual infants when we die, because we haven't had enough time on this planet to like you said, learn and grow and make discoveries and just develop on all levels. That's why they want us dead very quickly. So we're basically a bunch of babies that are dying shortly after coming out of the womb, spiritually.
Exactly, because as that's why the real people, if you read Marla Morgan's Mutant Message from Down Under, they took her on a walkabout across Australia. It's an incredible story. She goes and talks about the trips that they took her. They look that until you're in your 80s and 90s, you're not really clicking. You're not really a lot of experience enough to know what's going on and who you are and your gifts, and developing those gifts. And you have multiple gifts that you're born with, that you come into this world with, that you're given to by divine oneness, as they call it, or the one being that created all things, our Father. So if you look at that, that's why they want you gone quick, because you learn, you wake up, and they don't want you awake. They want you asleep.
Easily controlled, absolutely easily controlled. Well, my friend, it was a pleasure to have you on today. I think this is about your departure time for your next appointment, 11:30.
Actually, my next appointment canceled.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good. Well,
I'm actually exactly at what that departure time would have been, but it actually texted. I got a text during this, and the person had to cancel. They had a death in the family, so they canceled. So I'm actually got time.
All right. Sorry to hear that. I do have a scheduled call myself now at 12:30 p.m. and we're 12:31.
No problem.
So if your friends would have canceled on you yesterday, I could have stayed in bed later and not got a haircut till 10:30 this morning. I'd have loved that extra 2 hours.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I actually got up too, out of my regular time frame. So, right. Scott, you'd be okay with me playing a little bit of intro to the website I'm going to put up on the 17th?
Yeah, let me do this really very quick here. I want to give you let me give you access to be able to share the screen, so you can do that. Let's see, you are good to go. Go ahead and share that. Let's have a look. Yeah,
so this was going to launch on the 1st, and then we had some glitches, so we're going to launch on the 7th, but then we didn't have enough content up on it. So we're getting content on it so that when you join the website, either free or you want to have the back channel, there's content there. You don't just go, well, that's a beautiful website, but there's nothing here. So we're getting stuff there. So we're looking at the 17th. My internet's glitchy.
You know what, Gene? Just send it to me. If you can send me a link or download it or something,
I'll send it.
yeah,
At this point.
I can include it.
It's playing. It's not. It's like looks like it's playing, but it's not.
Yeah, I can just weave it right into
My internet's glitchy.
yeah, no worries. I'll just add it in. That way it'll be cleaner on this end. It's also always cleaner than a
Okay.
Zoom recording played, as a